The tower collapsed in a scream of metal and ice, a beam of plasma, searing blue and merciless, carved through the upper spire of Thalkesh Command as if it were made of snow. The resulting shockwave hurled shards of crystalline steel across the city, impaling walls, tearing through markets, and turning Nuvarek's last safe zone into a graveyard of shattered frost. Soval staggered through the smoke, his thick white fur matted with soot and blood. The lightweight armor clinging to his lanky frame, woven thermal fabrics reinforced with bone steel plates, was torn open across the ribs. He had no weapon left, just his breath, ragged and hot against the air that stung with superheated frost. Another impact roared in the distance. The ground trembled beneath his clawed feet. "Sector 8's gone!" someone shouted, barely audible over the alarms echoing across the city. He turned. Through the smoke, the rounded silhouette of Captain Aaron loomed. Taller, broader than most Thalkesh, the ceremonial bands on his arms glowing faintly with residual heat. His eyes, black and reflective, darted across the chaos. Behind him, 3 soldiers, barely more than boys, dragged a shattered energy shield emitter that had long since failed. "We can't hold the line, Captain," Soval cried, voice cracking. "The planetary shields collapsed minutes ago," Aaron said, grim. "They're inside. Not just above. Inside." As if to confirm his words, the sky split again. The Zarenth fleet descended like a swarm of spectral leviathans. Their ships moved in perfect formation, black, ridged hulls lined with glowing fins, wings like scythes sweeping through the cloud cover. There was no sound in their flight, no declaration of power, only destruction. Their weapons fell like divine judgment, silent, blue arcs of energy slicing across the city with mechanical indifference. The Zarenth themselves, beasts of jagged armor and grotesque symmetry, marched through the outer perimeter with precision. Their bodies, hunched and wiry, were wrapped in segmented carapace armor of obsidian green. The Hodag-inspired curvature of their spines gave them a forward-thrusting gait, almost like wolves on hind legs. Their snouts were elongated, split by a vertical maw of retractable fangs, and their eyes pulsed a dull red beneath a dome-shaped visor. There were no banners, no language spoken, only a broadcast. It repeated on every frequency, every channel the Thalkesh had left intact. "Surrender, or be extinguished." Aaron flinched as the message played on the crumbling comms array beside them. The words came through perfectly translated, yet devoid of emotion, filtered through synthetic vocalizers that stripped all meaning except finality. Soval turned toward the central tower, or what was left of it. "We have to call for help. There must be someone." "No one's coming," Aaron said, his voice low. That truth hung heavier than the smoke choking the air. The Thalkesh had once been respected among the neutral species, known for their scholars, their philosophy, their unshakable adherence to non-aggression. They had fought only once in the past century, and that to save strangers. That decision had cost them everything. The Zarenth never forgot. And now, they had returned to finish what they started. Down the corridor, a group of civilians stumbled from a half-collapsed shelter, elders wrapped in layered fur cloaks, children with glowing eye lenses, flickering in fear, all of them looking to the soldiers with pleading eyes. One of the youngest soldiers, Juren, broke ranks and ran to help a boy trapped under rubble. Aaron didn't stop him. He couldn't. There was no line left to hold. "All remaining civilians are being directed to the Kelnor tunnels," Soval said. "We need to—" A blast tore open the northern wall, cutting him off. Fire licked the stone like it was made of paper. Another squad of Zarenth stormed in, their rifles spewing bursts of violet flame. Juren didn't scream when he was hit. He just collapsed, unmoving, the boy in his arms still trying to breathe beneath the body now shielding him. Aaron turned, lifted his sidearm, an archaic pulse gun from the border era, and fired twice. The blasts hit one Zarenth in the upper torso. It barely staggered. A counterburst struck Aaron in the shoulder and threw him to the ground. Soval lunged forward, dragging him back behind a broken support column. "You're hit!" "I noticed," Aaron hissed, teeth clenched. Outside, the screams intensified. More of the civilians had reached the city's inner rim, what was once the ancient marketplace, now a field of debris and melting ice. The route to the Kelnor tunnels passed through there, but with the defensive emplacements down, they were exposed. A cascade of beam fire rained from above. One of the transport skimmers, overloaded with civilians, exploded mid-air. The shockwave flipped another skimmer nearby, hurling its passengers into the street. Flames spread across the frost, and the soft blue-white glow of Nuvarek's surface dimmed beneath the rising smoke. Saval stared, breath stolen. "They're not targeting infrastructure," he muttered. "They're targeting escape points." "They want this finished today," Aaron said, trying to rise. The ground trembled again. Another wave of Zarinth ships roared overhead, blotting out what little sky remained. The broadcast repeated, "Surrender, or be extinguished." Inside the frozen control chamber beneath the collapsed tower, Elder Drovim stood facing a shattered array of broken transmitters. His fur, once bright silver, now clung to his frail frame in clumps. He reached out with shaking claws, attempting to stabilize the primary signal node, long dead. Sparks leapt from the panel. The signal that had once kept them connected to the outside world was gone. Their allies, whoever remained beyond the veil, weren't answering. Not because they wouldn't, because they couldn't. The treaties had ensured that. He looked up at the two aides flanking him, both wounded, both silent. "There's no more network," he said. "We are on our own." Outside, the ice groaned as the bombardments reached the mountains. The horizon was lit with a pulsing red glow now, as sections of the outer glaciers broke apart. Avalanches triggered by orbital detonations. Snow swept into the city like a tidal wave. Below the surface, the entrance to the Kelnor tunnels yawned wide. Massive gates once sealed by ancient mechanisms now forced open by desperation. Families poured inside, their breaths visible in the frigid air, guided by volunteers wielding flare lights and ancient maps. The ice creaked above them. And still, no word from the stars. A Thalkesh communications officer named Marin stood over the primary relay hub, his hands hovering over the crystalline input pad. "We've looped the distress call 3 times, he said quietly. "No intercept, no response, nothing." "Then shut it down," said Drovim. "No need for our final moments to be spent begging into the void." Marin hesitated, then nodded. The signal died. Silence returned. Outside, the Zarinth ships began repositioning, preparing for atmospheric entry. The ground forces, having pushed past all resistance, now formed a perimeter around the last known civilian sectors. From the lead transport carrier, a grotesque, angular fortress painted in burnished bone, General Kurex watched from behind a curved command panel. His armor, ceremonial and ornate, shimmered with a faint green sheen. 4 spines jutted from his back, twitching as he accessed the local scans. His face, half covered by an oxygen filtration mask, remained expressionless. "Phase 3 ready," one of his lieutenants rasped. "Hold," Kurex replied. "Give them another minute." "To surrender? To die with a moment of hope," he said, mandibles flaring with amusement. "That is how you break a species." He tapped the display. The icy dome of Nuvarek's capital was cracked wide, bleeding heat and smoke into the sky. Below it, the last fires of resistance flickered out. "No reinforcements," the lieutenant observed. "No response fleets, as predicted." Kurex narrowed his gaze. "They thought no one would come." He paused. "And they were right." He gestured. "All units, commence eradication." And above, in the silence between orbital layers, beyond scanners, beyond thought, a ripple moved. Not a signature, not a beacon, just motion, unexplained, unannounced. The boy's breath came in short bursts as he sprinted through the ice-worn corridor, boots slipping on the frost-slick stone. Behind him, the tunnel shook with distant detonations. Echoes of plasma discharges bounced off the narrow walls. His fingers, bloodied and raw, clutched the satchel tight against his chest. Ahead, the passage widened into a dome of ancient ice, the ceiling arched with roots of glowing mineral. And there they were, two Thalkesh waiting in the shadows. "Troy," one of them called out, stepping forward. The Thalkesh was tall, lean under his heavy, fur-lined armor, with glowing indigo eyes and elongated digits shaped for the cold. His name was Darren Vok. He held out his hand, his claws not threatening but open in welcome. "Come, quickly." The boy didn't speak. He ran into the older alien's arms, nearly collapsing from exhaustion. Behind Darren, his mate, Sirayan, adjusted the heat gauze wrapped around a glowing thermal pod nestled in the floor. The pod hummed softly, filled with a dozen other children. 3 human, the rest Thalkesh, huddled together for warmth. None of them spoke. They hadn't in hours. Outside, the sky was dying. Darren gently pushed the boy toward the heat pod. "You're safe here." Troy Callan, 13 years old and orphaned by orbital fire, didn't answer. He sank to the floor beside the pod, pulling his knees to his chest. His eyes were wide, unblinking. He hadn't cried, not since the gunships came, and not since he saw what they left behind. In orbit, fire ruled. The Zarinth warships, monstrous constructs of bone metal and plasma filaments, swept low over colony grids and mining camps. Each ship bore the jagged insignia of the Federation, 4 interlocking talons, and each carried silence before them and ash behind. On command decks across the United Terran Strategic Fleet, panic had long since burned into grim understanding. Humanity was not winning. They weren't even fighting. Not really. They were running. Civilian escape pods were hunted. Outposts marked as dormant were reduced to slag in preemptive sweeps. The Zarinth called it preemptive security. The humans called it genocide. Those who resisted were labeled terrorists. Even diplomats were executed mid-negotiation, their blood-staining conference floors beneath the glow of banners preaching unification through dominance. One such diplomat had been Maria Kane. She died on Vatan Station, unarmed, with her son in her arms. Or so they believed. Gavin Kane watched the file flicker across his private console. The data feed, decrypted and filtered through half a dozen ghost nodes, was stamped with old Federation encryption, scrambled, corrupted. But the core message was intact. A visual fragment. 36 seconds. Maria Kane, bruised and breathless, carried their child, Caleb, through a fissure in the glacier wall. 2 Thalkesh warriors flanked her, weapons drawn, guiding her toward a tunnel entrance carved by ancient hands. Behind them, smoke rose from the charred remains of a Terran evac transport. The footage ended as the child turned to look back. The face was unmistakable. The hands at Gavin's sides curled into fists, knuckles pale against the metal desk. His face didn't move, but his jaw tightened. The room around him, narrow, dimly lit, tucked into the stone flank of an unregistered asteroid base, remained still. He replayed the clip, again and again, until he knew every blink, every step, every breath. Then he stood. He walked to the far panel and flipped the magnetic lock. Behind the wall, under thermal dampeners and silence fields, sat a display rack of officer-grade flight gear. Above it, the insignia of Earth's long-dormant 7th Fleet, etched into the wall with quiet precision. He reached for the coat. The rank pins were still there. The war was over, they'd said. Humanity signed peace under the Helion Accord. Diplomatic contact was restricted, retaliation forbidden, deployment constrained. But Gavin Kane had not forgotten who saved his family. And now, they were under siege. Troy Callan didn't knock. He walked straight into the darkened command tent, rain dripping off the edge of his shoulder pauldrons. On the table, the holographic map flickered. Icy blue ridges marking Nuvarek's eastern quadrant, dotted with Zarinth ship paths traced in red. Colonel Miles looked up from the data table. You're not on duty. I'm never off duty, Troy said flatly. Sir? Miles grunted. What is it? Troy reached into his belt and tossed a data chip onto the table. Intercepted signal. Pulled it myself from the deep intercepts. Miles inserted it without comment. The file activated. A Zarenth voice, metallic and processed, spoke with perfect Terran syntax. The content was chilling. Operation Nuvarek final phase confirmed. All Thalkesh life forms to be eliminated, no exceptions, civilians included. Silence filled the tent. Even the rain outside seemed to pause. They're purging the entire population, Troy said. We always knew it was coming. Now it's here. Miles stared at the feed. Command won't greenlight intervention. Treaty still holds. Troy took one step forward, voice low. I don't need a green light. I need permission to take leave. The colonel looked up slowly. What kind of leave? The kind where I don't have to lie about why I'm not here anymore. They held each other's gaze for several seconds. Miles exhaled. Unofficial leave, then. Troy nodded once. As he turned to leave, the colonel added, You think they'll remember you? Troy paused at the door, not looking back. They don't need to remember me, he said. They just need to survive. In the dark vacuum between Helion and the outer verge, 6 silos ignited. Each was hidden beneath the surface of a dead world, engineered to seem lifeless, scanned 1,000 times by Zarenth drones and dismissed. But deep under frozen rock, the launch codes had waited, buried inside legacy systems bound only to human DNA. The Treaty of Helion ended the war, but it never decommissioned the weapons. Now, as encryption layers fell one by one and authorization matched a single source, Fleet Admiral Gavin Kane, the silos unlocked. Reactors warmed, hulls groaned, coils charged. And somewhere, far above the clouds of Nuvarek, something stirred. The Federation had declared war again, but this time, Earth didn't wait for permission. The key rotated with a metallic click. Deep beneath the surface of asteroid Thren 9, hidden beneath 30 kilometers of frozen stone and false radiation signals, a reactor pulsed to life. Orange floodlights blinked on along the spine of the command corridor, casting long shadows across dormant consoles and aging steel. A low hum vibrated through the reinforced deck plating. Gavin Kane stood in silence at the control dais, his breath fogging in the cold air. His hand hovered over the biometric panel, palm open, veins visible under the skin. Authorization. Kane, Gavin, Fleet Command override. Activate Contingency Protocol Veritas 1. A moment passed. Then the lights changed. Status lights across the chamber shifted from amber to blue. The system recognized the voice. The codes. The man. Contingency Veritas 1 was live. All across the dead moons, the silent watchers woke. On Foros L, a dead ice rock orbiting close to Nuvarek, a subterranean hangar split open with a tremor. Dust spilled out into space as hydraulic arms pushed aside a centuries-old false crater. Inside, rows of destroyers stirred in the dark, massive angular constructs with hulls blackened by radar-absorbent plating and edges sharp enough to shear atmosphere. Each bore the sigil of Earth's silent armada, an emblem long erased from every public record. Power surged into their cores. Their weapons warmed. Hulls creaked as reactors awoke from deep freeze. None of it was visible. Not to the Zarenth. Not to anyone. Stealth plating ensured their presence remained unlogged by any known scanner, and their comms remained locked in tight beam quantum encrypt. No words were exchanged. No signals were sent. Only motion. In the center of the command deck aboard the Excalibur, the lead destroyer, Commander Rylan Voss stood at parade rest, watching the awakening fleet through a hollow viewport. "We go dark in 60, he said quietly. "Acknowledged," replied Lieutenant Cross, seated at the tactical station. All ships registering green. Weapons warmed, grav drives aligned. Voss turned toward his communications officer. No contact with Earth. None, sir. Not since activation. Good. Keep it that way. Across the sector, the sky remained still. No alarms. No transmissions. But the humans were coming. Inside the marine transport Daggerfall, the hiss of pressure lines and the clank of armor echoed through the hold. Rows of men stood at attention, each encased in matte black drop armor, lightweight exoframes reinforced with carbon-hardened plates and HUD visors locked to tight beam comms only. Their faces were unreadable, their names painted across the chest plates in faded white. At the head of the formation stood Troy Callan. He checked his gauntlet, scanning final diagnostics on his insertion capsule. Oxygen, thermal, systems integrity, all green. He looked up. "We drop on my mark. 0 broadcast, no pre-landing scans, no external transmissions." A sergeant stepped forward. "Sir, we're flying blind?" "We're flying silent," Troy replied. "And the first thing they'll hear is our boots hitting the ice." The room quieted. "Listen up," he continued. "This isn't a clean-up. There's no recovery, no fallback, and no damn press to clean up after us. We're ghosts, and ghosts don't knock." A single nod swept through the ranks. The dropship shook gently as docking clamps disengaged. A soft chime sounded. 10 minutes to planetary insertion. Troy walked the line slowly, one hand brushing the shoulder plates of the Marines he passed. They were ready. Every man there knew what was at stake. He stepped into his capsule, the hatch hissing shut behind him. Beyond Nuvarek's outer atmosphere, space shimmered, barely perceptible to even the most advanced Zarenth sensors. The fabric of gravity itself warped, not torn, not exploded, folded. Inside the Zarenth Command Dreadnought Ralkesh, Admiral Serac moved to the forward observation dome, his segmented armor reflecting the soft green glow of the interface consoles. His frame, taller than most Zarenth, had 6 long limbs, 2 of which flexed in rhythm with his voice modulators. His elongated face ended in a beak-like jaw, and clusters of translucent scales pulsed along his brow. "Status of planetary purge?" he asked. A junior officer, thinner and smaller, hunched over his console. "Phase 3 initiating, Admiral. Last resistance sectors are being targeted." "Good," Serac replied. He turned back toward the black canvas of space, his pupils narrowing. Then the light shifted. It wasn't a glow, it wasn't heat. It was the way light bent. A disturbance in the stars. Shadows stretched where there were no ships. Then a shape, impossibly large, emerged. Silent. Black as the void. The Excalibur appeared without warning. No jump signature, no energy spike. One moment, the sector was empty. The next, it wasn't. Behind it, 2 more destroyers slid into existence, followed by 5, then 10, then 30. No warning, no formation lights, no engines burning. Just raw mass and sharp edges blotting out stars, cold and calculating. On the Ralkesh, alarms didn't trigger. There was no signal to intercept. No code to jam. Just the growing realization. They're here. One officer whispered. Serac's neck twitched. "Deploy intercept squadrons." "Admiral, we have no record of these ships." Serac stared at the screen. "Because they were never meant to be found." The human armada hadn't arrived. It had returned. Down in the skies above, Nuvarek's troposphere twisted. Clouds tore sideways as atmospheric pressure recalibrated. Dozens of black streaks broke from low orbit, descending in coordinated silence. No flame trails, no sonar, no shockwaves. The human drop capsules tore through the ice wind without a sound, each one burning friction lines across the surface before embedding in perfect grid alignment across the outer rim of the conflict zone. The Zarenth infantry closest to the impact sites turned, confused. No alarms, no incoming warnings. Just silence, and black towers standing where there had been snow. Then the hatches blew. Troy stepped into the open air, his boots crunching into the snow like the first sound after a funeral. To his left, Sergeant Blaine emerged, pulse rifle raised. They didn't even hear us land. They will, Troy replied. He scanned the horizon. Plasma flashes lit the distance as Zarenth squads hunted down civilians. The evacuation corridors were exposed. Nuvarek was bleeding out. He tapped his comm. All squads, initiate blackout sweep. Target primary artillery relays first. Secondary objectives are exfil corridors. Move clean, move fast. Dozens of reply clicks echoed in his ear. Across the ice fields, black-armored Marines began moving. Without banners, without fanfare. No mercy, no retreat. Just quiet thunder rolling through the snow. The Zarenth dreadnought didn't finish its turn. No warning, no audible signal. 1 second it was aligning its targeting array toward Nuvarek's lower hemisphere. Next, a beam of condensed antimatter energy carved straight through its spinal core, severing engines from command. The rupture split the vessel like brittle wood, its inner hull imploding under the weight of pressure equalization. Aboard the Excalibur, Commander Rylan Voss gave the order without blinking. Shift targeting to the second formation. Ignore transmissions. Coordinates locked, Lieutenant Cross confirmed, fingers moving with practiced calm. 3 cruisers clustered, deploying Lance Strike Pattern Gamma. 3 seconds later, 3 black spears of light plunged from the heavens, tearing into the Zarenth flank formation. 1 ship vaporized before its distress beacon even activated. The other 2 ignited in sequence, hull plating flaking off in burning chunks as escape pods jettisoned in spirals of chaos. From the surface of Nuvarek, it looked like stars were falling. Serac stood frozen on the bridge of the Ral Kesh, mandibles pulled tight, eyes locked on the unfolding devastation. "They're not broadcasting," one of his advisors said, voice trembling. "No formal declaration, no encoded demands, just fire." Serac's lower limbs twitched. "This isn't war," he muttered. "This is vengeance." Outside the viewport, the black shape of another human destroyer passed directly above their formation, close enough for its underbelly structure to fill the entire view. Its hull bore no markings, no lights, just void-colored steel and silent engines. Then its torpedo bay opened. On the surface, Troy's boots slammed into the snow. The drop capsule hissed open behind him, steam billowing from the fractured seal. Around him, 3 more Marines emerged from their respective pods, pulse rifles raised. The air stung with the residue of recent orbital fire, ozone mixing with vaporized frost. Ahead, just beyond a ridge of cracked ice, screams echoed. "Move!" Troy ordered, and the squad surged forward over the crest. Below them, a Zarenth execution unit, 6 troopers, tall and hunched with insectoid plating, mottled green armor reflecting the smoke, stood over a group of Thalkesh civilians huddled against a frozen wall. One Zarenth lifted a plasma halberd, its edge glowing orange-red. Troy fired once. The pulse round hit the alien center mass, folding its body into the snow with a sizzling crunch. "Engage and sweep," he barked. Sergeant Blaine flanked left, taking down a second target with a short burst to the knees and throat. Corporal Ryler vaulted a broken pipeline, launched a concussion charge mid-air, and landed as the charge exploded, throwing 2 more Zarenth into a nearby snowbank with shattered chitin and fractured spines. Troy reached the civilians just as the last enemy turned, swinging its blade in desperation. He ducked under the arc, drove his armored shoulder into the alien's torso, and unloaded 2 shots into the lower abdomen. Close range, controlled. It dropped. "Clear," Blaine called. Troy turned to the group of survivors. 8 Thalkesh in layered rime-worn cloaks, their wide black eyes staring at the armored humans in disbelief. One of them, older, with a long braid of white fur tied behind his crown, stepped forward. "You're Terran," he said, voice hoarse. "We're Marines," Troy replied. "And we're not leaving without you." A silence settled. Then another voice, shaky, younger, whispered from the back. They came back. Across the snowfields, dozens of drop zones ignited in coordinated bursts. Capsules smashed through the frost. releasing squads of human soldiers in tactical waves. Each team moved with practiced efficiency, small unit formations, linked overwatch patterns, silent comms, and clean execution. The Zarenth weren't prepared for this. Their ground tactics had been designed to crush panic. Their formations expected chaos and fear, not counter-ambushes and staggered flanking maneuvers. Within the first 10 minutes, 3 artillery nests were silenced, 1 fuel depot detonated, and at least 6 squads of Zarenth infantry were wiped out before their command posts even registered hostile contacts. Captain Elijah Moran led his fire team through the remains of a forward Zarenth checkpoint, each motion deliberate. Secondary objective ahead. Biosignatures confirm prisoners inside. Sergeant Dare checked his readout. 2 guards. Thermal cam says no overwatch. Stack on me, Moran ordered. The squad breached with a synchronized entry. 2 flashes, 1 bang, and 3 precise bursts. Inside, a group of Thalkesh miners blinked up in confusion as the smoke cleared and the first human stepped through the haze. "We're here to get you out," Moran said simply. Troy's squad pushed south, toward a narrow ridge overlooking the entrance to the old water distribution tunnels. Kelnor substructure, long abandoned but now repurposed as a civilian refuge. The terrain felt too familiar. His HUD blinked with an incoming ping. Private Keller tapped his comm. "Sir, recon drone just mapped the corridor ahead. That's not Zarenth infrastructure. That's local." Troy narrowed his eyes as he looked over the terrain. The rounded ridges, the curving stairwells carved into frost stone. He knew those lines. He had run through them barefoot as a boy. "This is Sector Delta Chi," he said quietly. "I used to sleep under that outcrop." Sergeant Blaine looked over. "You sure?" "I carved my initials in the stairwell wall." Troy adjusted his weapon. "Let's move." They entered the old corridor. The stone remembered him. He felt it. The temperature drop, the familiar condensation patterns, the sound of boots on a path only he knew how to walk. Further inside, as they cleared a collapsed vent tunnel, voices echoed ahead. Thalkesh, panicked. "Hold position!" Troy raised a hand. "Flashlights off! We approach slow!" They turned the corner. 2 Thalkesh stood protectively in front of a dozen more civilians, weapons raised, makeshift poles and pipe blades, defensive but desperate. Behind them, huddled against the wall, were children, elders, wounded. The moment they saw the humans, the defenders tensed until Troy stepped into the light. His visor retracted. The Thalkesh nearest to him, the taller of the 2, took 1 step forward, eyes wide. "Troy?" Troy gave a small nod. The Thalkesh lowered his weapon. "You came back. For all of us," Troy said. "Now help me get them out." Above, in orbit, the Excalibur rotated slowly, releasing another wave of tactical drones. The battle in space had turned. Zarenth formations were breaking. Key command vessels gone. The remaining cruisers attempting to regroup found themselves isolated and flanked. Commander Voss watched as 3 enemy vessels collided while attempting emergency evasive maneuvers. "Let them panic," he said to his crew. "We'll clean up the wreckage." No cheer erupted. No celebration. Just fire. And silence. As it always had been. Troy slammed his shoulder into the bulkhead, forcing it open just enough for Corporal Ryler to wedge a charge inside. "Set," Ryler confirmed, pressing flat to the tunnel wall. Troy gave the nod. The shaped charge detonated inward with a focused boom, sending shards of composite alloy and glacial rock skittering into the darkness. Light poured through the breach, exposing the collapsed passage beyond. Screams echoed from deeper within, high, clipped, and in Thalkesh dialect. "They're here," Troy muttered. He moved first, rifle up, visor recalibrating for thermal bleed. The Kelnor lower tunnels were collapsing sector by sector. Zarenth squads had pushed deep beneath the city's surface, hunting down the final pockets of resistance and sanctuary with brutal efficiency. Troy's Marine platoon had been split in 2, scattered across fractured ice corridors, rerouting around collapsed shafts and impassable rock, and every delay cost lives. Behind him, Sergeant Blaine cleared the breach, followed by Ryler, Keller, and Lieutenant Park, their suits coated with frost and carbon scoring. "Contacts?" Blaine asked. Troy tilted his head slightly, listening through the HUD's sound filter. "Close, less than 30 meters, civilian and enemy heat signatures overlapping." Keller adjusted his grip on the pulse rifle. "They're boxed in. Not for long." They pressed forward, ducking under low arches of bent conduit and sagging walls. The tunnel widened ahead, and the beam light from Troy's shoulder lamp caught the jagged outline of Zarenth troopers, 3 of them, standing over a cluster of Thalkesh huddled at the base of a ventilation shaft. One Zarenth was charging a disintegration lance aimed at a wounded elder. Troy didn't call a shot. He dropped to a knee and fired twice. Center mass. The first shot caved in the alien's rib plating. The second blew through its side and struck the wall behind in a flash of red mist. Blaine and Ryler opened up a second later, staggering the other 2 troopers with pinpoint bursts. One collapsed as its leg was severed below the knee. The other lunged wildly, blade appendages flaring, until Park landed a clean round through the upper neck joint. It twitched and folded. Silence returned. Troy moved toward the group of civilians, weapon still up. His visor scanned each face. One of them, near the back, slowly raised his head. White fur streaked with ash, an arm wrapped tightly in cloth to staunch a burn. But the eyes, those were unmistakable. "Duran," Troy breathed. The Thalkesh elder stared for a long second, then spoke, voice hoarse and ragged. "You survived." "I did," Troy said quietly. "Because of you." Duran motioned weakly behind him. "Syrian, she's wounded. And the others? We have nowhere left to run." Troy's jaw tightened. "You don't need to run anymore." He turned to Blaine. "Deploy the beacon." Blaine opened a compartment on his back rig, removing a small disc-shaped unit. He slapped it against the tunnel wall and tapped a sequence on his forearm console. The device blinked to life, emitting a low-frequency pulse. "Signal locked," Blaine confirmed. "Shield carrier will have us in 10. Let's buy them that 10. High above, in the black between orbit and flame, Gavin Kane stood on the bridge of the Excalibur with arms folded behind his back. His eyes scanned the tactical display, 3-dimensional projections of the battlefield suspended in air. Dozens of Zarenth signatures had begun to converge from the system's outer rim. Reinforcements, not a full fleet, yet, but enough to complicate extraction. "Report," he said. Commander Voss turned from the console. "Multiple Zarenth ships approaching Vector 7, 2 frigates, 1 command carrier, heavy artillery signatures. Blockade status?" "Holding, but they'll punch through unless we redirect." Gavin nodded once. "Deploy the Talon Wing to intercept. Fire control patterns, Alpha Cascade. I want that carrier crippled before it passes the 3rd ring." "Understood." The Talon Wing, 6 destroyers built for rapid kinetic strike, peeled from the fleet formation and turned in unison, thrusters igniting in a controlled burn. As they accelerated, their hulls dimmed, activating stealth mode mid-flight. Gavin turned to the comm officer. "Status of the shield teams?" "Mobile projection field locked onto Callan's beacon. Carrier Odessa is descending to extraction altitude, ETA 5 minutes. Have them stay in the upper thermosphere. We don't risk exposure unless they breach atmosphere." "Yes, sir." Outside, distant explosions flickered in the dark. Back in the tunnels, the ground shook violently, a pulse detonation, likely from deeper up the shaft. Park cursed. "They're zeroing in." Troy tapped his comms. "Odessa, confirm projection sync." A crackle. Then, "Confirmed. Portable shield array deploying now. Target radius 10 meters, descending from grid 27. Blaine pointed. "Tunnel roof's not going to hold at this depth. We'll need to break through to the secondary corridor." Troy turned back to Darren. "Can they walk?" Darren nodded weakly. "Some, not all. We'll carry the rest." He moved through the group, motioning for the strongest civilians to start lifting the wounded. Ryler and Park took a girl with a leg torn open from shrapnel. Blaine and Keller hoisted a collapsed Thalkesh youth with a shattered jaw. Then the wall at their back caved in. A massive Zaranth brute, one of their genetically engineered close combat units, burst through the rubble, its body towering over the humans. 4 legs ended in hooked talons. Its upper body, armored in jagged blue scales, carried dual arc blades humming with static charge. Ryler opened fire. The rounds hit center, but the beast barely staggered. It roared, an echoing screech that rattled the stone, and charged. Troy met it halfway. He ducked the first blade, rolled under the second, and fired point blank into its left eye cluster. The impact spun it sideways, but not enough. It slammed him against the wall, pinning him. "Blaine!" Troy gasped. Blaine launched a plasma grenade. The device stuck to the brute's chest. A second later, it detonated. The explosion blew the creature sideways into the support beam and collapsed the ceiling onto it. Silence fell again. Blood leaked down the side of Troy's helmet. He pushed off the rubble. "Status?" Blaine pulled him up. "Everyone's moving." A low thrum began to echo above. Then a flicker of gold light passed through the cracked ceiling, spreading outward like a protective dome. The shield. A circular blue glyph lit up on Blaine's wristcom. "Odessa confirms field engaged. Surface evac corridor is open. Shield radius stable for 9 minutes. Troy looked back at the Thalkesh. "Move, now!" They surged forward, half carrying, half dragging the wounded through the old iceways, until they reached the exposed slope beneath the surface break. Above them, the armored hull of the Odessa hovered low, its repulsors melting snow into vapor. Cargo doors opened. Marines descended with stretchers and covering fire. And one by one the Thalkesh, bleeding, burned, exhausted, were pulled from the ice and into the light. From the bridge of the Excalibur, Gavin watched the Zaranth reinforcements peel away, their formations unraveling under the coordinated assault of Talonwing. "Carrier disabled," Voss confirmed. "The rest are pulling back toward the outer ring." Gavin's jaw stayed tight. "Track them, but hold pursuit." He looked out the viewport, toward the distant glimmer of Nuvarek below. "You don't run from what you don't fear," he said. "Let's make sure they never forget why they should." "Flank formation is rotating. Grid 6 to 9, Lieutenant Cross called out. Gavin Kane didn't respond immediately. His eyes stayed fixed on the translucent tactical overlay hovering above the central holotable. Zaranth ships moved across the display like red embers in a shifting pattern, but the Admiral wasn't watching the current position. He was watching where they would be. "Hold the Excalibur in place," Gavin said finally, his voice level. "Instruct Talonwing to feint westward. They'll attempt a reverse pincer. Let them." Commander Voss raised an eyebrow. "You're inviting a close assault?" "I'm letting them walk into it," Gavin replied. "They think we'll defend the high orbit. And we're not? We're going to abandon it." Across the fleet, encrypted orders were issued. Human ships, each one still cold, dark, and unreadable to most Zaranth sensors, began shifting with eerie synchronization. Some pulled back, slow and deliberate, as if retreating. Others changed vectors subtly, drifting toward predefined sectors that on the map appeared tactically unsound. But they weren't. Each one corresponded to the outer edges of debris fields left from the first wave, wreckage from the Zaranth's own destroyed cruisers, turned now into camouflage for the ambush to come. Above Nuvarek, the Federation fleet finally moved. The Zaranth flagship Torkazar led the charge, its dorsal cannons charging, flanked by 2 tri-engine battlecruisers and 4 heavy strikers. Their plan was textbook: sweep under the planetary arc, isolate Earth's forward line, and smash through the center before the flanks could realign. Except the flanks weren't flanking. They were waiting. Gavin watched the enemy close in, a faint shadow of a smile playing on his face. "They're too fast," Voss murmured. "They're overextending." "They don't know," Gavin said, "that we calculated their trajectories 2 minutes ago." A light blinked green. Fire pattern Theta 3. Now. The ambush unfolded in absolute silence. From behind the wreckage clouds, stealth destroyers powered up in perfect formation. Dozens of kinetic mass drivers fired in unison, each slug tearing through the vacuum with hypervelocity force. The lead Zarinth cruiser took 3 rounds across its engines. No explosions, just clean exit wounds and a slow tilt into a spin before the reactor ignited. Another vessel banked too late and caught the full burn of a wide-arc EMP net. Its systems died instantly, turning the warship into a cold, tumbling shell. The Torkazar tried to respond, rerouting command functions to rear control. That's when Talon Wing dove. 6 ships in perfect delta formation punched through the upper flank and eviscerated the Zarinth carrier in a 10-second coordinated strike. No warning, no flourish, just disciplined precision and the brutal efficiency of seasoned tacticians. On the Excalibur bridge, Cross whispered, "They're unraveling." "They always do," Gavin replied. "They don't adapt, they react." Across the sector, Zarinth formations broke apart, some trying to flee to the far edge of the orbital ring, others pulling back toward reinforcement points. None of them made it. Each retreat path had already been mapped. Each one already had human guns waiting. On Nuvarek's surface, the tunnels burned. Troy vaulted over a collapsed pipe, landing hard on blackened stone as plasma bolts scorched the air above him. Behind him, Blaine returned fire, cutting down 2 retreating Zarinth units as they tried to regroup at the edge of the chasm. "Last groups dug in past the reactor spill," Ryler called out, pressing into cover behind a shattered bulkhead. "They've got 2 sentries, automated turrets, and some kind of jammer." Troy studied the ceiling above the corridor. Loose ice, cracked supports, thermal instability. "Then we don't go through the front," he said. "Keller," he barked, "set a vertical breach charge on that main beam. 3-second delay." Keller moved without question, attaching the compact charge to the ice strut. Troy helped Blaine pull the civilians back 20 meters, shielding them behind debris. 3, 2, 1. The explosion was controlled, but devastating. The ceiling collapsed onto the Zarinth bunker, bringing 2 tons of frost and steel down on their heads. The blast smothered the defense grid and wiped out the jammer. What remained was silence, and steam rising off fractured armor. Troy stood slowly, checking the chamber. Clear. He approached the center of the rubble, eyes narrowing as he spotted movement. One Zarinth still breathing, barely. The alien reached a trembling claw toward a weapon. Troy kicked it away and knelt beside him. The Zarinth's faceplate was cracked, one eye leaking biofluids into the frost. Troy leaned in. "Now you see," he said softly, "what happens when you hunt the wrong species." The alien rasped something in a guttural tone. Troy didn't answer. He stood. "Evac corridors open," he said. "Get the rest moving." Back in orbit, the last Zarinth battle group tried to regroup near the outer moons. Their commanders were desperate. Orders scrambled, hierarchies broken. The centralized control system they had relied on was now fractured. The humans didn't need a fleet-wide command. They were trained to think. In the center of the Zarinth command cruiser Vel Zenith, Admiral Krex pressed his claws to the comm panel. His mandibles twitched in stress. "Open transmission to Terran flagship," he hissed. "Channel open," his officer replied. Krex stood straight, brushing blood off the front of his plated chest. "This is Admiral Krex of the Zarinth Federation. We propose an immediate ceasefire. We will withdraw all forces from Nuvarek and surrounding sectors. We request only that you—" A sharp tone interrupted the feed. The signal died. Back on the Excalibur, Gavin didn't blink. "Did we reply?" Voss asked. "No." Silence hung for a beat. "They're offering surrender," Cross said. "They're offering delay," Gavin replied. "We didn't come here for surrender." He turned toward the viewports. The fires of the battlefield danced in the black. "We came for justice." And the order went out. No reply. Only fire. The Zarinth fleet broke. It didn't retreat with order or dignity. Just panic. Command vessels, stripped of escort, attempted shallow jump burns to escape orbit. their engines igniting unevenly as they scrambled for distance. Smaller warships weaved erratically through the battlefield, abandoning formation, fleeing like fractured limbs from a severed spine. From the command deck of the Excalibur, Admiral Gavin Kane stood motionless, eyes locked on the tactical interface. His voice cut the silence. "Seal every corridor. Full orbital interdiction. No ship leaves Nuvarek's sky." Lieutenant Cross turned from his console. "Admiral, their formations are broken. We can let them fall back." Gavin didn't look away from the screen. "No, they ran from mercy once. Now they'll face memory." He pressed a control on the console and opened a system-wide transmission. Broad spectrum, unencrypted. The message was short. "You don't deserve compassion. The Thalkesh did. We don't." The channel went dark. And then the destroyers moved. From all sides of the upper orbital shell, Terran warships tightened the noose. No alarms, no open warnings, just cold geometry as the kill zone collapsed. The Zarenth cruisers that tried to outrun the formation were met with kinetic lances, slugs moving faster than light, slicing through shields and hull alike with pinpoint precision. The Daggerfall decloaked mid-spin and gutted a troop carrier in a single strafing run, its railguns firing in 3-second bursts before vanishing again into black. The Vindicator flanked left across the outer debris field, igniting 2 escape vessels with anti-armor torpedoes before circling back into Overwatch. One Zarenth dreadnought broadcast a surrender beacon. It was received, it was acknowledged, and it was spared. Those who lowered their weapons lived, those who ran did not. The final act of the orbital campaign took less than 4 minutes, and when the fires faded, Nuvarek's sky was still. On the surface, the wind had stopped. For the first time in days, the air no longer echoed with artillery, engine screams, or bone-splitting detonations. Only the distant hiss of snow shifting against stone and the creaking groan of thawing metal. Troy Callan stood just outside the collapsed entryway of the old Kelnor tunnels, surrounded by silence. His armor was scorched, cracked along one side where a plasma burst had nearly breached. Dried blood darkened the right edge of his jaw. Behind him, the remaining Marines stood in a half circle, weapons lowered, visors dimmed. No one spoke. Before him, the last of the Thalkesh survivors had emerged into the light. Dozens of them, elders, wounded, children, stood with blank eyes and hollow shoulders, their expressions wrapped in a daze that only comes after surviving too much. The snow clung to their fur, softening the exhaustion etched into every movement. Among them stood Daran Vok, upright with effort, leaning on a carved staff, his breathing shallow. Sirayan sat just behind him, swaddled in furs, still unconscious but alive. Her side had been burned through weeks ago. She hadn't spoken since they found her. Troy stepped forward slowly, his boots crunching the frost. He stopped in front of Daran and reached up, releasing the side latches on his helmet. The seal broke with a soft hiss, and he pulled it free. Cold air hit his skin. The wind bit. He didn't flinch. Daran looked up. The two stared at each other for a long moment. Troy's voice was low, raw. "You saved me when I was just a scared kid," he said. "No one else would. You risked everything." Daran blinked once, his eyes glistening. Troy took one slow breath, then dropped to one knee. The sound of armor touching ground rang sharp in the stillness. His head bowed. "From the bottom of my heart," he said, each word carrying the weight of years held back. "Thank you for your kindness." Behind him, one Marine moved, then another, until the whole squad dropped to one knee in unison. Not by order, by memory, by honor. The Thalkesh didn't speak, but something shifted. Daran reached out, one trembling hand pale against the dull steel, and rested it lightly on Troy's shoulder. No words passed between them. None were needed. Around them, the wind began to stir again. Not a storm, not a howl, just the quiet return of a world no longer under siege. Troy stood, his eyes locked with Darren's one final time. "We hold the line," he said softly. And this time, they were not alone. The last Zarinth signal went dark at 0312 Standard Time. No trace, no final burst of static, no escape ping. Their flagship, gutted and silent, floated like a shattered carcass in the upper orbit of Nuvarek, its engines frozen in place, its spine split open from the dorsal ridge to the reactor core. Debris fields drifted around it like drifting funeral stones. The rest of the fleet had already been dealt with, either destroyed by kinetic barrages or captured during failed escape burns. Those who had surrendered were corralled into low-orbit containment fields, watched silently by black-hulled Terran warships that hovered like unmoving statues in the cold. The planet was secure. Inside the command center aboard the Excalibur, Gavin Kane stood alone beneath the main viewport, his silhouette cut sharp against the dying light of wreckage burning across the sky. Below, Nuvarek stretched vast and glacial, white again, now that the fires had dimmed. Commander Voss stepped to his side, the silence between them unspoken but complete. "All contact sectors confirm," Voss reported quietly. "Resistance eliminated. Civilian safe zones intact. We've pulled back all ground units." Gavin nodded once, his expression unreadable. "Signal the fleet," he said. "Extraction formation." Voss turned, but Gavin added, softly without looking back, "And put out the final broadcast, the one they'll remember." Voss paused, then gave a slow nod. "Yes, Admiral." Across the bridge, Comms Officer Keller tapped the final sequence into the encrypted channel. The Terran fleet's tight band network linked instantly, bouncing the message to every listening station, every relay, every satellite hidden in the dark. It wasn't encoded. It wasn't cloaked. It didn't need to be. The voice of Admiral Gavin Kane echoed clear across every comnet in orbit. "The Thalkesh showed us kindness when no one else did. We don't forget." That was all. The silence that followed said the rest, and one by one, the Terran destroyers began to rise. No engine flares, no formation calls, no declarations of victory. The Excalibur turned its bow upward, engaging thrusters at minimal power, its frame gliding smoothly through the upper atmosphere. Behind it, the Talon Wing, Vindicator, Daggerfall, and Odessa followed in staggered succession, ghosts peeling away from the world they had returned to protect. Each hull was scorched. Some carried damage deep into their armored frames. Not all had returned with the same crew that had dropped in, but they left in silence, not as conquerors, as those who had paid a debt. Below, on the icy plains outside the ruined city of Kelnor, Troy Callan stood on the edge of the ridge, watching the trails of departing ships vanish into the thinning sky. The snow beneath his boots was still stained with scorch marks, with fragments of plasma-chipped stone and collapsed tunnel scaffolding scattered like broken ribs across the landscape. But the wind was still, and for once, the smoke was gone. Behind him, the Thalkesh were tending to their wounded in quiet order. A field med station, built from salvaged parts and the rear half of a Terran drop pod, served as their temporary shelter. Some still sat in silent clusters, warming their claws around portable heat coils. Others stood, staring at the sky the way people do when they're no longer waiting to die. Darren stood nearby, supported by a carved staff, his breathing slow but steady. His left shoulder was bound in a sling. He hadn't spoken much since the final evacuation. Troy lowered his helmet, resting it against his hip. A faint chime buzzed in his ear. He tapped the side of his visor. "This is Callan." Gavin's voice came through as flat and calm as ever. "Status? Final clear. We swept the last sectors 2 hours ago. No more heat traces, no active weapons. Civilians accounted for. Extraction complete. Debrief when you're ready." Troy looked toward the horizon, where the last of the destroyers was now a distant dot, shrinking into the black. "It's done," he said. There was a short silence on the line. Then Gavin spoke again, quieter. "You held the line. We all did." The channel clicked off. Troy stood there for a moment longer. Then he turned. He walked down toward the Thalkesh, the snow crunching beneath him. No one said anything as he approached. He passed Sarayan, resting on a blanket of hides, her breathing now deeper, fuller. He passed the children, some now playing near the remnants of a marine's discarded armor plate, their movements cautious but no longer frantic. He passed the old wall, the one he remembered carving into as a boy. The mark was still there, faded, nearly erased by frost and time, but visible. Troy reached out and touched it, a simple T cut into the stone. He let his hand rest there. The others watched him, not as a soldier, as someone who came back, someone who remembered. The clouds parted above. The sky revealed itself, wide, clear, cold, and marked forever. Nuvarek remained, scarred, but not broken. The ships were gone, but the message remained. Hey, you're still here. That's awesome. Hope you had a great time with the story. Remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons. It really makes a huge difference to the channel. And hey, I've got something else for you. I've chosen another story that I think you'll really enjoy. Just click the card right here, or hit this one to jump into the full playlist. See you in the next one.